history, it is true that it did come from female hereditary practitioners who are also called Devadasis. In the Devadasi communities, women were the bread earners of the family. So I did law for 5 years. It's one of the longest courses, undergraduate courses. And before that, 20 years I had learned Bharatanatyam. Nobody mentioned to me about the Devadasi Abolition Act. And the law, the Devadasi abolition law that we're talking about, is literally 2 pages. And it's the most absurd law you can ever read.
Welcome back to another exciting episode of Stay Tuned with Anusha. This is Anusha welcoming you all. And here I bring stories that inspire, empower and spike our dreams. Today I am thrilled to introduce someone to you who has beautifully redefined their path. To her, dance is not just the movement of body, it's the dialogue between the body and the soul. Every gesture she makes, every footfall she takes is a story that has been told since centuries. And she brings life to those stories just through her elegance of expressions. By merging timeless tradition with modern expressions, Priyanka Chandrashekar keeps the ancient art form of Bharatanatyam alive by bringing new energy into its history. Priyanka Chandrashekar, welcome to Stay Tuned with Anusha.
Hi Anusha, thank you so much for having me.
In nature, we witness different patterns of dance like the courtship dance of birds, the wiggling dance of bees, or the playful leaps of dolphins. We get to see so many rhythmic dance kind of patterns like the butterfly also. So what is dance according to you, Priyanka?
So, like you said, I think dance is all around us. It's in nature. It's everywhere we look around. There's movement, there is dance. Like everything at home, I feel like there is a rhythm to everything that we do. There's a rhythm to everything that sort of exists around us. Dance to me is a huge part of my identity because I've been dancing since I was a child. So I've grown up dancing. I've always thought that I will grow up and become a dancer. So it's a huge part of who I am. And for me, dance is really a form of expression of what you feel, expression of what you feel about the world around you, expression of your ideas, your opinions. It's really just expression, but through your body, through movement.
Like you said, dance has been the most important identity of your life. So when did you start your journey with Bharatanatyam specifically and at what age?
I started dancing at the age of 5. Actually, my mother took me to dance class at the age of 4. And the dance teacher said, you are too young, you don't know right from left, so please go back, come back next year. So actually, I wanted to start dancing even a year before that. Actually, my mom wanted it. And then I started finally at the age of 5. My beginning steps were really thanks to my mother. I don't think I knew that I wanted to dance or that I would be good at it. My mother always wanted to be a dancer. So as soon as she had a girl child, she said, oh, my daughter has to learn dancing. And she put me into dancing. It was her interest that got me into Bharatanatyam. Initially also it was mostly her efforts. She would take me to dance class. She would make sure I practice. She would be very interested if I'm performing and all of that. And I don't know when slowly that converted into my interest. After a while, I decided that no, I will continue dancing even when I'm in my 10th, even when I'm in my 12th. I said, no, I can't stop dancing. I danced in college. And then now it's a full-fledged career of mine. But my initial steps were thanks to my mother at a very, very young age when I didn't know that dance was for me.
Priyanka, Bharatanatyam is such a dynamic, intriguing classical dance form. And we hear there are so many different styles of Bharatanatyam across South India. So actually, how many Bharatanatyam styles actually exist and what makes them unique?
So when I started to learn Bharatanatyam, they are called as banis. Or within the form, you have multiple styles which got developed because of the gurus that started their own lineage. And they added that little bit, the flavor, as you can say, to the form that they taught and they performed. And that became their style. And it became famous also with their name. So like you had a very famous teacher who taught the Pandanallur style because he was from Pandanallur. So then you had Varavu Ramaya Pillai, the style of Bharatanatyam that I learned. He's from, that's his name. And that became the style. So it's like saying tomorrow, 25 years from now, Priyanka style or Priyanka type of Bharatanatyam. It's really just that. It's just those names sound like a form of their own because they're quite back in the time. So there are multiple forms of Bharatanatyam. It was very stark, the difference between the different forms of Bharatanatyam. Maybe 10 years back or 12 years back, it was very different. Like if I had learned the Kalakshetra form of dance, and now I wanted to go to the Tanjore style, people will be like, oh, I can't take you. You go to another teacher who does that style of dancing. But today, I don't think as practitioners of the form, we're following that so much. I think now we respect every individual for their own, what they bring into the form. And I think everything is Bharatanatyam. I don't think we have to sort of box it and say this is the Kalakshetra style and this is the Varvu Ramya Pillai style. I think these boxes are becoming very diluted now. And so, yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is the number of forms now, actually, even in the fraternity, it's becoming a little irrelevant in the sense people are saying it doesn't really matter. If you're dedicated, then you dance and you dance the way your body can dance. So I think, I think the forms are going a little out of vogue.
Priyanka, Bharatanatyam has a rich and intriguing history, and many people say that it is a pure expression of mythological stories and it is deeply connected to temple culture. But we hear different stories of its origin. So, can you just take us through the time lapse of, how was it transformed? Where was the origin? What is the essence of its origin? And how is it different than the dance we never got to know? How is it different totally now?
It's not an assumption, actually, Anusha. It's actually true. It is the history of the form in the sense that it is not taught. So that is why people are unsure of that history. It's not taught in dance classes. We still talk about that mythological story as our history in Bharatanatyam because we want the form to be connected to religion. We want the form to be connected to God. That's why we do that. But actually, the history, it is true that it did come from female hereditary practitioners who were also called Devadasis. Like I said, they were also called by other different names depending on the community that they belong to. Dance has always been a matter of patronage in the sense that earlier temples were not like the temples of today. They were like social hangout places, like how we have our cafes and things like that. So all the patronage for arts and for dancers came from the temples. It was the temples that were funding these performances, were funding these dancers, were even allowing them to stay in the temples and things like that. So obviously, that's why the dancers were performing in the temples. Slowly, once you had a lot of the kings starting to have power, the power shifted into the hands of the kings from the temples, which were the heads in that society, went to the kings. And once the patronage shifted, slowly the dancers also shifted where the patronage shifted. So it goes to courts. After a while, it became the Britishers because we were colonized and they became not just people who came to do trading, but they were now ruling the entire country. So then they said, we're going to ban the dance. So then the dance gets banned. So it's like today also, Anusha, we're really dependent on our audiences, right? Yeah. For any art, in fact. And definitely dance is also a part of that. Like if I don't have an audience, I'm not a performer. It's like that. So I think even historically, that's what happened to the form. It shifted from place to place based on who was supporting it, who was funding it, and who was patronizing it. So first it was the temples, then it was the courts, and finally the Britishers sort of said, we won't do it. And today now, I think the state is the biggest patron of the classical arts. Like Bharatanatyam is supported by the government a lot in terms of awards and titles and things like that. So now we are slowly sort of doing what the state wants us to do. So it's always, I think that's the reason it moved from temples to courts. Yeah.
When we talk about the evolution of Bharatanatyam, we can't just ignore this monumental shift that occurred after this passing of Prevention of Dedication Act by Britishers. It just basically stopped the temple dancing of Devadasis, and it just said that you can't portray any more of this Shringarasa aspect, which is the erotic aspect of this dance form. Was it necessary, and how did it change? What was the impact that happened on Devadasis, and who took over, and how is it still existing now?
So earlier, it was a matriarchal system of society, and it's really important for me to say that because today we live in a very patriarchal world where the man is the head of the family. In the Devadasi communities, or where the practice of dance was passed on from generation to generation, the women were the bread earners of the family. And that's how the lineage sort of continued. It was passed on from the mother to the daughter to the granddaughter, and it continued like that. So, why that is sort of also important is this form of dance actually empowered the women back in the day. And that's what a lot of research scholars have written and researched and said, that this was a way for them to express themselves, whether they were angry with their boyfriend, whether they were angry at the temple for not giving them enough space or giving them the freedom, they would express it through their art, through their dance, because they used to sing and dance also at the time. It was not like the musician was separate and the dancer was separate. So why that's important to say is, so there was a lot of empowerment, there was a lot of freedom in the initial days. This is before the act that you mentioned came into being. Once the act started to come into being, of course, these women were completely marginalized. There was a taboo. Anybody who danced was seen in a wrong way. All the patronage went off, so they had no other way but to earn money through prostitution. So there, again, a lot of problems started to happen, where these women were almost blacklisted from society. So then what became the need for Bharatanatyam is it had to be taken away from the bodies of these dancers, because anything that was attached to their bodies was taboo. It was sort of banned or abolished. So now you needed new bodies to come into picture who were pure in that sense, who were untouched, who did not have these stigmas associated with them. And you also needed the form to now not have those erotic elements, as we say, which is the Shringara Rasa that was very prevalent in the dance of the Devadasis much earlier on. The freedom to express their sexuality, freedom to really say what they want, to speak their mind in the language that they wanted. There are these beautiful compositions about really intimate things about how a woman felt while making love, while somebody left her and went. There are these really intimate details which only a woman could have written. It's really like that, the compositions. But all of these elements had to be removed from the dance in order to save it, as a lot of people would say. Otherwise, the dance would have also sort of, because the dancing bodies were banned, the dance also in a way had to stop, right? So in order to take the dance away from the dancing body, you had a lot of Brahmin women who came to the forefront, like Rukmini Devi Arundel, and who started Kalakshetra, and a lot of other artists at the time, who then had to change the form drastically in order for it to survive, as they say. There is a huge critique of this, by the way, that, it's unfair to have separated the dance from the dancing body. It's wrong for Rukmini Devi to have, saved the form and to have cleansed it. So what we did to Bharatanatyam is we made it clean, as we, in a way, you can say that. So we removed all the erotic elements. We removed all the explicit content. We removed extra, so it became from Shringara Rasa, it became Bhakti Rasa. And we started to see the relationship of any man and woman as the relationship between God and human. And that became the predominant idea in Bharatanatyam. So it became Sanskritized, it became Brahminical, it became, and to the people who support that idea, they will say it was needed. How else could the form have survived? And to people like the Bahujan communities today, the Dalit communities today, to which the hereditary practitioners then belonged, are really angry, saying that, it was unfair. It was unfair that, you sort of grafted this art form into another body and changed it so much. And now we all have to follow those rules. We all have to follow the geometry of the form. So I was saying now whenever I tell a child in dance class that, no, sit like this line, you can't sit loosely, you have to sit, in that posture, in a very rigid way. There are people who are saying that why? That's not how the dance of the Devadasis was. And we have no idea how that dance was. What we dance today is what we feel is Bharatanatyam. But I don't think it has anything to do with the dance that was there before the passing of this act. There is almost no resemblance. We trace our roots to that, but we have completely transformed it to a point where it almost doesn't talk to each other. So I want to tell you that I met this hereditary practitioner who from somewhere in Tamil Nadu. She's really, really old. She's 95 years old now. And she has seen this entire thing happen in her lifetime, where she was dancing, the act was passed, she was asked to stop dancing. She lived very humbly and she was very poor. She had no patronage. And today we found her from one of the villages in Tamil Nadu, and now she's talking in a lot of seminars and conferences and educating people about what had happened and the history of the form. And if you see her dance, she still dances and she loves dancing. She's so passionate about dancing. If you see her, you're just like, how? Like, so many bad things happen, but somehow that passion is still alive. And if you see her dance, it's nothing like how I dance. It has nothing to do with Bharatanatyam as we call it today. So yeah, I mean, and we're very lucky and fortunate to have seen her and her work and her dance. But her name is Muthu Kandamal. She's from a village in Tamil Nadu, and she's fabulous. And it's when I saw her move, I was like, what am I doing? And what is she doing? So yeah, that much has changed in the form.
During your own learning of Bharatanatyam, did any of your guru or mentor you came across, did they ever mention of how these Devadasis were actually connected to the history of Bharatanatyam? How did it change? What happened? Did anybody mention you while you were learning it?
No, yeah, they didn't, okay? And I was so shocked. So I am a lawyer by education.
Okay.
So I did law for 5 years. It's one of the longest courses, undergraduate courses. So 5 years also, I never heard about this law that existed. And before that, 20 years I had learned Bharatanatyam. Nobody mentioned to me about the Devadasi Abolition Act. And I'm just like, and I've written exams after exams after exams. So I've done the theory bit also. And still, I had no clue. So one of my reading groups, when I was reading a book with a friend, we came across this and I was shocked. And I said, what is this? And the law, the Devadasi abolition law that we're talking about, is literally 2 pages. And it's the most absurd law you can ever read. So I came to a point where I was like, I have to talk about this. Then I created a piece. Today it's called Suo Moto. I still perform it. That's primarily on the Devadasi Abolition Act and how the Bharatanatyam as a form came to me. I connect that to how the form came to me. And I present it today as a performance because it just became like a story I had to talk about because I was shocked that nobody spoke about it for the longest time. So yeah, nobody spoke about it growing up. Still, what is shocking is still even teachers who are my age, much younger, not even the senior teachers, even now, there is this whole connection between God, culture, religion, and Bharatanatyam, and still they're not talking about the history of the form, which is tragic, really.
Priyanka, Bharatanatyam, like any other classical dance form, has set of sequence and stages to be followed in an exact routine. So, what is the exact sequence of this dance form? And I want to know if you personally adhere to it or you just a little bit here and there, bring it in your own way.
Yes. So this is one of the most favorite questions I've been asked on a number of occasions. So this is what we call the margam in Bharatanatyam. Margam means right direction or the right sequence or the right path. And there is path in which one has to sort of learn and also perform the repertoire of Bharatanatyam, and it starts with like Allaripu, Jatiswaram, Shabdam, Varnam, Padam, Tilana. In that we added a Pushpanjali because time has evolved and now we want to do a Pushpanjali. Then we removed the Jatiswaram and we said, oh, Jatiswaram is boring. We'll not do that. Shabdam is so outdated. I think we just teach it in class and nobody does a Shabdam anymore because it's a smaller version of the Varnam. Why do it? We'll just go to the Varnam. Then we added kritis. Now those have become really popular, like a Tyagaraja kriti or a Swati Tirunal kriti. These kritis which are about like in praise of the different gods and goddesses, those became now a part of the margam, which was not there earlier. Now those get inserted in the first half or the second half. Then you have javalis, which are padams are the slower storytelling piece, abhinaya piece. Javalis are more fast paced and they're more quicker, they're more witty. So that gets added because as a community we are evolving and we want something like that. And then we have then we have a virittam or a shloka that comes somewhere in between. We have many alterations that we have done to this margam, and beautifully so. And I think it speaks so much of who we are today and how we want to express. And yet there is this fascination in Bharatanatyam with the margam. Challenging this idea, Anusha, you know what I do in one of my repertoire performances, a 1-hour performance, I start with the tilana, which is what you're supposed to end with, just for kicks. So in that performance, I start with the tilana just because you're not supposed to. And I sort of ask the audiences, does it make a difference? Nobody cares. Really, it's just how we are taught the pedagogy of the form that after this, you learn this, after this, you learn this, and that is the order in which you should perform it. Like, for example, now I'm teaching my children the Alarabu, which is supposed to be the first item in that sequence or margam, which you're supposed to teach, learn, and therefore perform also. It's the most difficult item for a child to learn. So I feel, and that's what I do as part of Nirali as well, that I think there is a great need to reimagine this pedagogy. There is a great need to now see who are we as people. Are we the same people we were 50 years back? I'm nothing like my mother or my grandmother. So the Bharatanatyam that my grandmother would have liked can't be the Bharatanatyam that I like. So in some ways, I think there is a need for teachers today to start rethinking margam. I'm not saying leave it. I'm saying let's play with it. Let's see what works for us and, let's redefine it if that's what's needed. And we have done it in the past. Just, we've not said it out loud. And if I say it out loud, people get like, oh, she doesn't follow the margam kind of a feeling. But people have done it all the time. People have added and removed things from the margam. And I think it's not so static. And I think the form has to keep evolving. Yeah. So that's margam for you. Bharatanatyam, the way it was passed on to me, like how it was taught to me from my teacher, had to have that costume exactly the way in silk and the temple jewelry, which is also silver. And then you have the hairstyle had to be this long braid, which is very heavy, by the way, or like this bun that you had to do with all those pokey flowers and 100 other things that you're wearing. Gejje was a very important aspect of the whole thing because that's what gives you that sound of the rhythm that you dance. There are these many elements that growing up, my mom really fussed about. Whenever I got ready for a performance, she had to ensure that I wore 3 nose pins. Okay. Not 1, okay? 3. So these were all like if you had to wear the full headset. The half headset was like for casual performances. But if it was a serious performer or a serious performance, you had to do the whole thing. And I think it's beautiful. And I think that so many things about it, it really accentuates. That's really what Aharya is supposed to be. It's supposed to accentuate your dancing or your dance form. Some days I feel like, Anusha, we've pushed it a bit. And it's become just about looking pretty. I do feel like that as someone who's practicing the form. It's really now, some days when I see some dancers, I feel like it's just becoming about the looking. It's what they're saying is losing importance and how they are saying it and how they're looking is gaining more importance. Some days I feel like that. And the other thing that is really interesting about Bharatanatyam is you cannot, if you're saying, say, if we were to make a Bharatanatyam choreography about this conversation we're having, which I think is possible. If we were to make a choreography about this, you can't do it in the same form. Then it'll look like a Varnam. And it won't make any difference. So if you have to say a new story, you have to change how it's packaged. And this packaging, the costume, the hairstyle, the bindi, and all of it is very deliberate. And it wants to say only one story. And if you're going to say some other story, then you have to change these outside packaging in order to say something more meaningfully, is what I realized. very difficult. As a practitioner, it's super difficult to break these elements or even change it a little bit because the form is so, it's given. The rules are already provided. So to change the form and change the way it looks is extremely difficult. About the posture, very interesting question, Anusha. So Aramandi is your main posture in Bharatanatyam. As a child, we all just learnt it. It was painful, I'm sure. Now I can't remember if it was. I'm sure our knees were hurting, our feet were hurting because you also had to stamp the floor and all of that. We learnt it. I don't know. I don't remember complaining or, saying, oh, this is so difficult. I don't remember doing that. But today, children are not like that. So today when I teach, I was teaching a 11-year-old and I told her, can you sit in Aramandi? I had taught her what Aramandi was. She asked me why. I really don't have an answer because, why?
Because I was dumb.
Yeah, really, that's the only answer you can give a child who's asking you, why should I sit in Aramandi? Because it's painful. Why should I do something that's painful? Now children are that articulate and children are able to say that it's painful, so it's bad for me, so I won't do it. So why should I? So give me a good reason. And I have no reason but to say that it's part of this form. I can't imagine today Bharatanatyam without Aramandi, but maybe that child can. And why not, right? So I feel like there are multiple, again, postures, gestures that we very popularly use in Bharatanatyam, which I think for years to come, children will start questioning and they will challenge these ideas. We better have answers for these things. We better know why we are passing this on exactly the same way. But yeah, so a lot of these things are now in my teaching, in the way I perform, all of these things are less important now because I don't have a very strong answer to sort of justify them. I feel like it's okay. Whatever is possible to transfer, like if a child is not asking, great, sit, I will teach you. But if the child is questioning, that's a body that's questioning. So you have to sort of make space for that child. So all of these elements are now slowly not so important, at least in the way I dance and I teach. But they are very, very critical to define what is Bharatanatyam and what is not, for those who want to. I don't really like that exercise, but I know that a lot of people find value in that. For them, these elements become extremely important. Yeah.
I really want to know that why Bharatanatyam was only embodied to women back in those days or even to now. Yes, from past century or a bit more than that, we see men, performing different classical dance forms or Western dances. But when we go back in time, it was mostly connected to women. Why specifically only just limited to women?
I think the reason is, again, history. So there, like I said, it was danced by women. Earlier, the hereditary practitioners were women and it was passed on from women to women in the family household. So it was always imagined to be a form that would be practiced on women's bodies. But you just needed a purer or a body that had not been attached to any kind of stigma to practice it. So even then, back in the day, in the 1940s, 30s, it was taken over by Brahmin women. And it's interesting that you asked that question because at the time, Brahmin women were living in patriarchal households. They were not as empowered as the women in the hereditary practitioners who got to step out of the house. They had all the financial independence. Brahmin women didn't have that back in the day. They were financially dependent on their husbands. Their husbands would actually be visiting courts and visiting prostitute houses, and they would be patronizing all the other dancers at the time. And women had to just live in those relationships. They didn't have a voice. It is, I believe that at the time that Rukmini Devi Arundale sort of took this on and reinvented Bharatanatyam in many ways, it did empower the Brahmin women to step out of their house, to appear in their body on stage. Yes, of course, we marginalized women, and that's not fair, and that's unfair always. And the cost is still wrong to have done that. But I feel like it did give the Brahmin women of that time some agency to step out, to be recognized, be seen, to have a voice, and at the time it would have been really empowering.
Yeah.
And I think that tradition continued. Like it started with the women being marginalized and other women who were more suited to become the Indian woman at the time when India was really looking at bringing or consolidating an identity. The more suited women became the carriers of Bharatanatyam on their bodies. And I think it just was always in our imagination a form that women would do. It's really that, which again, of course, changed after Kalakshetra came into being, and then male dancers started to be part of the dance drama that Kalakshetra created, and then we today have, of course, a lot of male dancers. But I think because historically it came from women, it started like that, and therefore we still stay in a majority even today. But today, men, I think dance is quite.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of men do take this up very seriously. There is a book, I should mention this. And this was discussed in the Natya Kala conference that happens every year in Chennai in the Margari festival. There's a book that was written by one of the students of a very famous guru called V.P. Dhananjayan. He's a Kalakshetra, very famous dancer in Chennai. And they're a dancing couple. The husband and the wife dance. And now, of course, they're very senior and quite old. But they have a huge institution in Chennai. They had actually come for my Arangetram when I did it in Bangalore. They were the chief guests. So their student has written a book about male dancers and Bharatanatyam. Because her guru was a male dancer, right? V.P. Dhananjayan sir was a male dancer. And she talks about how there is no money in this form. The money that you earn is only through teaching, really. There is no money in performance. It's so ad hoc. It's so erratic. People pay so less. And the investment is a lot, right? The silk costumes, the hair, the musicians, everything is so expensive. There's no money. And that is why men sort of refrain from taking this on as a full-time career because they have to support families. The problem is they're not thinking that women can support families. That's still a problem. And they think it's okay for women to do it because anyway, that's a secondary income. They don't think of the women's income as the primary income, which is wrong.
Yeah.
In her book, she addresses it like that, which is a problem. But that perhaps in a country like India, which is still very patriarchal in the way we think, where men are still really holding the head of the family, men don't take this on for very long because of monetary reasons, I also feel. And women are able to because they're again just supporting the family and that additional income, which is very bad for the form, but yes.
Bharatanatyam is traditionally captivated by boomers, millennials. So those audience knew the mythological stories. So whenever they see the performance, they can reconnect or recall the characters by looking at the attire or the expressions or the way they express. But now the audience is drastically shifting from those boomers and millennials to Gen Z. So how will they be connected still in this art form or any other classical dance forms? Because they are mainly into contemporary expressions. So how will they be still relevant with this art form?
Like I said sometime earlier, I think there are a lot of people who believe that Bharatanatyam should remain unchanged. Whoever comes, millennials, Gen Zs, whoever comes, the younger audiences have to be cultured. They have to sort of find a way to connect with the form. There are people who believe that, like a lot of my teachers, a lot of my mentors believe that we are the high art, we are the performers. You have to find a way to connect to it. And somehow there is that very popular opinion as well. But there is also a huge set of practitioners who are working towards making Bharatanatyam more accessible. I believe I'm one of them for sure. And through Nirali, my only aim with Bharatanatyam is to reimagine the pedagogy so it's accessible while learning to children today and to adults today with the schedules that we have today, with the Bangalore traffic, with all of it. Can I make a class? Can I make Bharatanatyam accessible to them as on date? And also in performance, I'm very interested to explore new text. I'm a little bored with the same 500 years old texts. I don't think we connect to them. Even when we read them, I don't think we connect to them so much. So I am exploring new texts. Like, for example, the Devadasi Abolition Act is a new text for me. I have used the Ayodhya judgment, which is a recent 2-year back judgment, as text. I want to use newspapers as text. I want to use contemporary poetry, like maybe what children learn in their English classes as text, because that's the text that we read. Like I use Constitution as the preamble of the Constitution as text, because these are all living documents for us and documents that are relevant today. So making Bharatanatyam accessible is a huge part of what I want to do with the firm and my artistic practice. I wish and hope there are more people who think on similar lines. I know that there are people who are trying new things with Bharatanatyam. Not the same Ramayana, but one slightly different story, but within the Ramayana. There are people who are trying to take those steps, which are useful. But I feel like Bharatanatyam still needs to come a very long way to sort of become relevant and accessible to audiences today. Because I think we're a very evolving generation and so exposed. And I think the onus is on the practitioners and the performers. Unlike a lot of people who believe that the onus is on the audience, I feel like that's not true. I feel like that the onus is really on us practitioners to make the form accessible. And I think we should allow the form to change. We should evolve, and not, if we keep Bharatanatyam static, it's going to die. So we have to sort of let it evolve to adapt to the needs of people, and maybe give up on, I don't know, the costume or Aramandi, I don't know. Still, I think it's a very difficult thing to do, like I said earlier. It's a huge struggle because we are also trained in that form, right? So now how do you break it? But I think that is critical. I think Bharatanatyam needs to change in order to adapt to audiences today. But I think we're also, as a community, as a fraternity, we're very far from... Of course, I think I do. I think more than opposition, because people don't really talk and tell you feedback. You know, what they do, no, Anusha, which is very sad, is they put you out. So this is the framework of Bharatanatyam. Now you're out. You do what you want. Somehow that happens so there is a gatekeeping that we call in Bharatanatyam, that there are some gatekeepers who really uphold the form and say, this is Bharatanatyam, this is not. So as long as we have that gatekeeping, I think it'll be very difficult for people to sort of express themselves, have their own voice, be inclusive of everybody and anybody who wants to just move. I think, there is a lot of opposition. There is a lot of unsaid criticism. Not if it's criticism and it's constructive and you're telling it to the person is useful, then the form is evolving, the community is evolving. But that's not what happens. So yes, there is opposition. But nevertheless, I think some of us, like I'm okay. Like I feel like I might as well be on this meaningful path than to pass on exactly what my teacher taught me and then that person will pass on. I mean, it's redundant. I want to make some difference. So, yeah.
In today's rapidly changing world, Bharatanatyam or any other classical dance forms is not just a traditional dance, it's a social expressions. So how can Bharatanatyam be a strong voice, in addressing critical issues like maybe politics or gender issues or women rights or any other aspects that we are still concerned of? How can Bharatanatyam express those themes?
I think Bharatanatyam can. Like I said, I think as a form, as all the tools it gives us, not as the form as I was taught like by my teacher with those items, but the tools that Bharatanatyam gives us and teaches us, I think there is a lot of room to explore whatever we want, whatever themes, whatever texts that we want to. What is the difficult part is to, in a way, deconstruct ourselves. In order to you have to break the form and break the training that you have done for 25 years, which is very difficult to do, in order to do that. That's the difficulty. I don't think otherwise, and of course you have to be really invested in that idea of gender or talking about queer community or whatever it is that you want to talk about. If you're really interested to do it, I think you'll find a way to do it. But the difficult part is to sort of untrain yourself. That's the difficulty.
And bring in new gestures.
Bringing new gestures. So this is again a very big problem. Like for example, there is no way in Bharatanatyam to sit on a sofa. But we don't sit on the floor anymore. Now that's our reality. Now I have no way to do that. Like I said, we don't have a gun, for instance. in Bharatanatyam. We don't have a gesture for, say, a phone. There are a lot of things that today, the computer, of course, I can do it like that, but that's not a gesture accepted in Bharatanatyam, right? So yes, Bharatanatyam is an outdated form. So we have to not let Bharatanatyam be a box. We have to make all efforts to put whatever possible in Bharatanatyam that truly connects to who we are today. But that's a difficult one, Anusha. I think people are still very, very interested in just keeping it as is and passing it on as is. Okay, like they're really holding it like, So it's an attitude shift that's required. But there is work that is happening on lines of gender. There is work, but they all don't look like the familiar Bharatanatyam. That's the problem. So you and me and a lot of audiences may not even recognize it as Bharatanatyam because it doesn't fall within those parameters. But for me, they are really Bharatanatyam. And I would say there is an urgent need to explore these themes. How we can explore these newer themes in Bharatanatyam is, I've seen a lot of performances using these themes. I myself also use gender as a very popular theme. And I think the practice for how to create is, again, to explore new texts, to really be okay with it not looking like a familiar Bharatanatyam. And I think it needs a fully different imagination. It's very different from how my teacher taught me and how I practiced for the performances I did as a child. And I think that our entire artistic practice needs to change. Like, it's not about just dancing every day and sweating it out. And okay, that can't be our practice in order to create work like this. Reading has to be a part of practice. Conversations have to be a part of our practice. Watching a lot of performances of different kinds have to be a part of our practice. We have to be more interdisciplinary in the sense we have to try and see how we can learn from theater, how we can learn from technology, how we can learn from different disciplines and add that into Bharatanatyam. And be okay with it not, like I said, not feeling familiar. I feel like that all the time. It's very uncomfortable in my body. It's very new territory all the time, which means you're feeling vulnerable all the time. It's not something even though I've danced for so many years, because of the new work that I'm attempting, it always feels like, oh, what is this? It doesn't feel comfortable. So to put yourself in that discomfort is how we can create works around a lot of the themes that are relevant today, I think. Yeah. So Nirali is really this initiative that I have started where I train people in Bharatanatyam, through which I create performances both in solo as well as in ensemble format. And over time, I also want to start research and a more developed practice of Bharatanatyam. But really through Nirali is where I reimagine the pedagogy of Bharatanatyam, both for performance as well as for teaching and learning. And for Nirali as well as for me, I feel like this is a exciting and a big year. We have a lot of performances lined up. I performed this repertoire which I call Kannadi, which is sort of 4 compositions that I put together, which is about politics, which is about personal stories, and it's critical thinking, but in Bharatanatyam. So that performance I'm hoping to take to different places, hopefully Chennai and if possible Bombay this year.
Nirali is such a beautiful name for a dance class. So you as an artist or a mentor, how does your dance class is different and what does it embodies?
With Nirali, I think I'm really excited about the format of classes that I'm doing. I'm hoping to grow my Bharatanatyam brunch classes, which I do on Sunday, which is my creative class. I'm trying a new format of classes with adults, which is accessible for the lives that we live in today, for adults who want to reconnect with the form. And I have some performances by the children who come and learn at Nirali and some workshops lined up for them.
It was truly a pleasure having you on my podcast, and I'm so glad that we sat and had all these conversations, because I think we digged in a lot into the history of Bharatanatyam, and I wish nothing but the best to you and to your dance class Nirali, and I hope you grow so much. You see so much success upcoming in your path.
This was lovely, Anusha. I mean, I think It's rare to even have conversations, I feel, in the day that we live in today. I think we live off of social media so much that these conversations really feel very valuable, and they're very touching and heartwarming. And I'm very glad that you chose to do this with me. I got this space to sort of talk about my ideas and express myself here. So thank you so much. This is lovely.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. With this, stay tuned with Anusha.